Hello, and welcome to the Project Good podcast. I'm your host, Anne Marie Hilton. Project Good is a social impact podcast interviewing experts and advocates about the pressing problems that we face globally and hearing how they suggest we move forward in the future. The Project Good podcast is brought to you by Project Good Work. The goal of this podcast is to inspire people and organizations to develop a mindset that can move others to positive action regarding the complex social issues facing people and the planet. For August, we're focused on changing the script. Being a kid is hard in any decade. Navigating how to find out who you are, what role you play in your family, developing friendships, dating, school, peer pressure, rules, your hormones, and preparing for adulthood. Having guidance and a guide in life is crucial for young people to succeed, and many children in today's world may not be able to count on their parents to show them the way due to the growing complexities of our fast-paced, technology-driven, and culturally shifting society. A youth crisis has emerged from a combination of socioeconomic, mental health, educational, and systematic challenges that significantly impact the well-being and future prospects of young people. During this month of Black Philanthropy, we're looking at youth in Atlanta, Georgia, a city rich in culture and opportunity, but also marked by challenges that vary across communities. Programs and initiatives continue to emerge to support the well-being, education, and future success of Atlanta's younger generation. One of those outstanding organizations making a difference is L.E.A.D Center for Youth. L.E.A.D Center for Youth is a nonprofit organization operating in Atlanta, Georgia, whose mission is to empower an at-risk generation to lead and transform their city of Atlanta by using the sports of baseball and tennis to teach Black youth how to overcome three curveballs that threaten their success: crime, poverty, and racism. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing C.J. Stewart, the co-founder of the L.E.A.D Center for Youth and a former Chicago Cubs outfielder who has achieved unmatched success in the player development industry with over 22 years of experiencing developing some of the game's top amateur, collegiate, and professional players. He has a wealth of knowledge regarding sports-based youth development and is a resource for social justice, and he has an impact on sports and the social emotional development of youth. Let's get into the interview. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking to C.J. Stewart, an Atlanta native and former Chicago Cubs outfielder and co-founder of L.E.A.D Center for Youth. He has earned the recognition of being one of the top baseball players and development professionals in the country. Stewart has achieved unmatched success in the baseball development industry. He has trained and developed some of the game's top amateur, collegiate, and professional players. Stewart's impressive client list includes Jason Hayward, who is from the Chicago Cubs, and Dexter Fuller, who is from the St. Louis Cardinals, just to name a couple. Stewart grew up in one of Atlanta's toughest neighborhoods, Hollywood Brooks. His story is a perfect example of the phrase, "Where you start doesn't determine where you finish." Welcome, CJ.
Welcome. I'm excited to be here with you.
Yes, I am excited to have this conversation with you. I love the things I always love. Young people. I love food as well, but I'm like, who doesn't love food? And of course, nature. So those are you bring in some of my favorites because, of course, you play baseball outdoors, so you get to interact with all of the elements. So I'm very excited. Before we get into the meat of the questions, I always ask a personal question to kind of get to know the person and their heart. So being that you were a professional baseball player, the thing I think that all people think of for professional athletes is they want to know, who were they or how did they become this person as a child? So how and when did you find your passion for baseball?
Yes. And so, for starters, words matter. And so the Latin word for passion is suffering. And so what we have suffered from or suffering from is what we're passionate about. And so I was really introduced to baseball at a level where I was really locked in and engaged around the age of 8 years old. It was 1984. I was born in 1976 in Atlanta. I'm a Grady baby. And so what that means, if you're a Grady baby, that meant two things. That meant you were Black and you were poor. African Americans that were working class and at the poverty level. That was the hospital that we were born at. And so I was reared in the Bankhead, Northwest Atlanta community. And my grandmother and grandfather lived in Southwest Atlanta. They were working class as well, but they had a home in the West End. And also in that community is where a lot of your middle class African Americans lived as well. Hank Aaron, Ambassador Andrew Young, former Atlanta mayor, and our first African American mayor in the city of Atlanta, Maynard Jackson, and John Lewis, and several others. So it's 1984. I'm 8 years old. It's hot in the summertime in Atlanta. I'm at my grandparents' house. And in the daytime, I would watch Chicago Cubs games with my grandfather. And at night, I would watch Atlanta Braves games. So the Cubs were much better than the Braves. So I love the Cubs. I remember distinctly watching the Cubs games, and they would have ivy on the outfield wall. And my grandparents, in their yard, they had kudzu. So I would go outside and imagine that I was at Wrigley Field. And fast forwarding, I had my first workout with the Chicago Cubs at age 14. I was drafted at 18 and age 20 by the Chicago Cubs and played in the Cubs organization for 2 years. And as a kid, just being exposed to great, iconic men like Martin Luther King Jr., who's a son of Atlanta, like myself, and Hank Aaron, who is from Mobile, Alabama, but played for the Atlanta Braves. I said, when I grow up one day, I want to be something like both of those guys. So, yeah, baseball has been a part of my life since the age of 8, and I'm still going at it.
Wow, wonderful. How you, especially when you talk about how words matter and how they influenced you. I think, obviously we're seeing that, message even resonate more today than ever before when we talk about social media and just media in general. And that obviously one of the things that has been missed until would say fairly recently, and what I mean fairly recently in probably the last decade or two, is that health overall is more about what you feed yourself, not only from a food standpoint, but mentally, socially, and who you surround yourself with.
Absolutely. And, I think that's even the case as well, too. Growing up here in Atlanta, the home of the civil rights movement, there was a very big push for Black boys to grow up to be strong Black men and a part of the Black intelligentsia. We definitely had amazing men like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who set a high bar for that. And then what I also discovered, even though athletics was not something that was really accepted back then, because it was kind of looked at as something extra to do, the focus was supposed to be on academics, and athletics would be one of the things that I have learned is that a antidote for stress and trauma is movement. And so that's the thing that athletics did for me that allowed me to be healthy as a child amid a lot of issues that I was dealing with amid trauma in my household and also in the community. But then even also too, when we started thinking about the mind, body, and the soul, and again, going back to that Latin word of passion and what you're suffering from, I just really at a very young age was keen on where I wanted to be when I grew up. And I didn't want to miss opportunities even as a child to be properly positioned to become a major league citizen, even if I didn't become a major league baseball player. And so that soul work is very key. And, that's why even now, conviction is such a very important part of coaching kids and really convicting them, giving them a sense of reality and love and support, because winning at the game of life is a challenge.
Yes, it is. But everything is so important in order to, especially for youth, I think. I just have I have a 4-year-old right now, so I have a long way to go. But I think, well, I guess they start getting influenced young, and
Oh
so
yeah.
maybe not now. So maybe I'm, I guess these days the kids are a little bit different due to technology. They're, by 3, they're like, let me show you mommy, daddy.
Yep.
So I guess it is a little different now. So I know, so being the co-founder of L.E.A.D Center for Youth, and I know that, your other co-founder, of course, is married to you.
hmm
So when, I guess, tell me a little bit about the L.E.A.D Center for Youth. Why, I guess, did you guys inspire each other to do it? Were you pushed by your spouse to do it, or was this something that was on both of your hearts? How did it come about to be?
Yeah, well, for me, when I was a child, again, navigating life, living in a poverty-stricken community, Northwest Atlanta, but then my grandparents living in Southwest Atlanta, and they did not have very much financial capital or social capital, but there was another end of Southwest Atlanta where Hank Aaron lived and a lot of the other civil rights leaders and prominent people in Atlanta. And so I played baseball at Cascade Youth Organization, and my very first coach was Emmett Johnson Sr., and he was the chairman of the Atlanta Public Schools Board of Education. And so that position then and even today is more powerful than the city of Atlanta mayor. And so from there, another mentor that I had was TJ Wilson, who was a Atlanta Police Department officer, and he was the one that got me my very first workout, Chicago Cubs at 14. So it was as simple as me telling him what I wanted to be when I grew up. And he had lots of social capital and constantly put me in the right place at the right time to be seen by the right people. And then from there, another mentor of mine, and all 3 of these men were African American. Derek Stafford, who retired a few years ago as a highly decorated NBA referee, and he's also from the Bankhead Zone 1 community where I was born and raised. But he had a lot of influence, a lot of affluence. So for these men, just being with them allowed me to become everything that I ever dreamed of becoming. Except there was no really intentional framework or programming around it. And so in 2007, my career was long over, and I was 9 years into our for-profit business, Diamond Directors, that Kelly and I developed. And to date, we've been a part of the development of 43 Major League Baseball players. And one of my clients, a white man, Stan Conway, had his middle school age white son, Davis Conway, in for training with me. And Stan, a very successful real estate developer, he told me 3 things that changed my life and caused L.E.A.D to be established. He said, CJ, you are a very good coach, but if you were as good as you claim to be, your rates wouldn't be so low. So my rates were very low, ranging from $50 an hour and sometimes maybe $10 an hour, because I was competing against competitors based on price. And so that was a new revelation, because Stan, a very wealthy man, was just saying, hey, listen, the good stuff always costs. And so I didn't understand my value. So my prices always fluctuated. The second thing he said was, it was too easy for people to get access to me. And so he was helping me to understand that, CJ, you have potential to be a really exceptional coach, but right now your rates are low, and there's no system in place. People can just kind of walk in off the street and have access to you. Kind of reminds you of going to the dentist. At least my experience, you go to the dentist, there's someone at the reception desk, and then a dental assistant will come and help you and do a lot of the work, and then the dentist comes in and kind of gives the final touches. Well, I'm a master level coach at this point, but I'm doing everything. And then the third thing that Stan said that really launched L.E.A.D was he said, there's a decline of blacks in baseball and you're not doing anything about it. So that was a very convicting experience that got me connected to my new life purpose that has always been in me, but that conviction really brought it out. So this was a soul-searching moment. It was a moment, again, the Latin word for passion is suffering, that brought out a lot of the things that I've suffered from. And so the mission of L.E.A.D essentially was giving Black boys an opportunity to navigate life in a very deliberate way, so that we can, to the extent that was possible, we can almost guarantee the kind of outcomes that I got that is very rare for Black boys growing up where I'm from.
Oh. And so I guess in this experience, I've just been to Atlanta as a visitor, but I haven't lived there. So, probably radically different being a visitor versus living, just like anywhere else. I guess within, since you, had the personal experience of experiencing growing up from, the community that you did, and then being able to grow and become very influential in a lot of different ways, and then coming back to, it's like you went full circle in your life, I'll say, right? So you took that, everything, that experience, and then brought it into, maybe, as I'm thinking, maybe you now teach things that you wish that other people gave to you. Yes?
Yeah, absolutely. And kids, Black youth in particular in Atlanta, need that intentional development framework. And that's what L.E.A.D is, Launch, Expose, Advise, Direct. That is the framework, and we are a sports-based youth development organization. And so that's the methodology that we use, a globally recognized methodology that helps kids make healthy transitions into adulthood. So just for perspective, I grew up in poverty in Atlanta, but city of Atlanta now is actually worse than what it was when I was a kid. And so, you're talking about the civil rights movement in the 60s. I was born in 76, so things were a lot better, but still not great. If you're born in poverty in Atlanta today, you have a 4% chance of making it out. The majority of people in the city of Atlanta are Black. And so there's a high concentration of poverty, specifically in Atlanta public schools, which has close to 50,000 students. And around 80% of those students are living at or below the poverty level. So, you have Metro Atlanta, but you also have the city of Atlanta. So I'm talking about the city of Atlanta. So if you're born in poverty, you got a 4% chance of making it out. And the city of Atlanta is number one for income inequality based on race in America. America is number one for income inequality among the G7 developed countries in the world. So we're talking France, we're talking Canada, Japan. And so when you think about that from a racial standpoint, and we're talking about racism with regard to not just an event, but a structure. We're not talking about racism as in name calling. The outcomes that are barriers for youth with regard to educational outcomes, health outcomes, and home buying for families. We're talking about, for decades, disinvestment in people because of their race. Now is the time to make sure that children, in order to win at the game of life, actually have a trauma-informed approach, evidence-based, so that sports isn't just looked at something that's extracurricular, but co-curricular to help them win at the game of life.
Yes. And I didn't even know that the percentage was so low. Goodness gracious. Wow. I knew it was low, but I didn't know it was 4%. So that is, I was just going to ask you what the curve balls are, but you pretty much just laid out what the curve balls are of, crime, poverty, and racism. A lot of these youth are facing an extreme uphill battle, I would say.
They are. And again, as we break down racism before, it's about people, it's about power. And when we talk about that power structure of systemic racism, we're talking about influence, which is relationships, and affluence, which is money. And so then the third part that we add on to that to fight racism is the advocacy. And so we look at our mission statement to empower an at-risk generation to lead and transform the city of Atlanta. That word empowerment to us means to give responsibility and authority. So as a chief visionary officer, I need to be obtaining as much power as I can so that I can empower. So even being on this podcast with you gives me a reach so that we can be heard and known and seen so that I can empower. And so what I grew up under as well too was this notion that, to an extent, exist through obscurity. Don't try to be known. Don't worry about who gets the credit. But that's not something that I ascribe to. I think the last thing that a Black kid needs is to follow a Black man or a Black woman that is obscure. People need to know what we're doing, especially kids that are living in crime-ridden communities. We know for sure that racism is man-made. We know that poverty is man-made. And so when you have poverty and racism, you have crime. If you want to reduce crime, you have to reduce racism. We're talking policies. You have to reduce all of these inequalities. So that is something that's very important. And we know as well, too, going back to the conversation around the Black intelligentsia and the Black athlete oftentimes, in many cases, has been the first to ever integrate spaces within this country. And so now I'm grateful that with the fight of L.E.A.D and the fight of others is making sure that people understand the importance of sports. We just finished the Olympics. There's no sporting event that's larger than the Olympics, and it's made to be a big deal because it really is a big deal, and in fact, it's biblical. So to have one population of people where sports is just looked at as something fun to do and is removed when things get tough, but then have affluent communities that have sports programs, resources at the schools, and sports is looked at as co-curricular to help kids be stronger in the classroom. And so now poor kids have to suffer because they don't have the financial resources, and that's where L.E.A.D comes in with the advocacy piece.
Looking to reach people who believe what you believe? Advertise on the Project Good podcast. Contact us at projectgood.work/podcast. Advertise today. Yes, and I was noticing not only, I was just looking, when I was looking on your website preparing for this interview, I noticed, not that, obviously sports is a big part of it, but it kind of, the way that you present your program is it really is more of an, I would say, an enhancement to, I guess, the core development of the individual person. That's what I was starting to get anyways on the website, that, maybe at the beginning when you started it, it was like, okay, we're going to teach, youth, baseball and tennis, but then it has become that the actual sports is now an enhancement that then I think gets, becomes even better once the person, you're a professional athlete. So I'm deducting that once somebody really gets to know themselves more and more, they're, as an athlete, they only become stronger and stronger. This is my thoughts. I've never been a professional athlete, but that's what I deduct. Is that true?
Yeah, so you're right on. And we want our boys in baseball and girls in tennis to become major league players and major league citizens. Major league citizens meaning they're gainfully employed, civically engaged, and radical philanthropists. And so using sports as the vehicle. Sports is our vehicle. Academics is not our vehicle. Flying planes is not our vehicle. Baseball and tennis is the vehicle where they're going to be developing their social emotional learning capacities like academic self-efficacy, self-confidence, contribution, self-management, social skills, social capital. They're going to build all of these things through these sports. Now, somebody that wants to do it through swimming or golf, that's not a concern of ours. We are launching a coach's certification late fall 2024. Well, we'll be able to teach the tactics of L.E.A.D for other sports-based youth development practitioners to use their technical focus on there as well. So, it is a very important thing for us to use sports as a vehicle. Also, too, to note the importance of sports is baseball was invented in 1845 in America, in New York, and it was the very first sport that was ever invented by Americans. So up until this point, other sports that we were playing came from other places, and baseball was derived and influenced by cricket. And so when we invented baseball, it became the very first sport, and thus America's favorite pastime. So to play baseball inextricably meant that you were American. If you weren't playing baseball, you weren't American. So if I stop right there, like that's a really, really big deal. So that's 1845. The Emancipation Proclamation was signed in 1863. So Black people had been playing baseball since its creation in 1845. And in a lot of cases during slavery, a lot of enslaved Black American people were the ones playing the sport against other plantations. 1865 was Juneteenth, where now the last enslaved people in Galveston, Texas, were found out about the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. And then in 1884 was the very first African American to play Major League Baseball. And so, at this time, his name was Moses Fleetwood Walker. So when you look at this timeline, we're talking about America, sports in general, but baseball specifically has always been a very important part of this country. So I would argue that even now today, if your community doesn't have baseball in it, in the eyes of some people, you aren't even American, which is why there's a very big push to make sure that we increase the number of Black people playing the sport. Because on one end, it could also come across as Black people aren't as American as other people because we don't play baseball. So that's another reason why we have to fight for our race of people to be in the game. And not just from the standpoint of recreation and having fun, but all of the social emotional learning capacities that are developed through the sport, but also the social capital that is developed as well.
Yes, I love how you did the historical perspective, because I love history, and you brought up something that I never even thought about of a big reason why to have Black people play is to tie them into the whole American society, and also the baseball, I would say, is also what they would say always when you watch the movies, part of the dream, right? Mm-hmm. And I've never even thought about putting those two together, but it all makes sense now, and it's much deeper than I think most of us think about. And so one of the things, I guess, since I like that you are such an introspective person, what have you learned about yourself since starting this organization?
What I have learned about myself is the importance of obtaining success and using that success to serve others. When I was a child, I just wanted to be rich and famous. so that I can have this great life. And there was a portion of me, just because in my family, I saw people in my family serving others, especially through our church. But I would say that most of my focus, about 90% of my focus, maybe even 95%, was just get as much as I can get. And the other 5% is give whatever I wasn't too selfish to give up. But through L.E.A.D, this truly is my life work. I mean, it's something that, people talk about retirement, and I want to be doing this work until my very last breath. I'll be limited as to how much I can throw to kids and hit them ground balls. But when you talk about me being introspective, that's something that I can have and do. Coaching coaches, leading in communities and helping people understand the importance of sports to be a part of your community. So I've learned that. So success leads to significance. What I've also learned, the two other S's that comes before those two S's is stupidity and struggle. So stupidity is knowing the right thing to do and not do it. And then struggle is making mistakes out of ignorance while trying to be successful. And so for a large part of my life, I just continuously was being stupid. Having this calling on my life to serve people and use my life as a positive example, the way other people did it for me. My coach, Emmett Johnson, TJ Wilson, Derek Stafford. And I kept rejecting that and just being selfish. And the problem with stupidity is stupid people are stuck. We're stuck, and it's not really much that can be done. Like, it has to be internal. We can be inspired externally. But the bridge from stupidity to struggle is humility, not thinking less than of yourself, but thinking of others more than yourself. So, the question is, what have I learned about myself? Don't be stupid. Struggle is better than being stupid, and use your success to serve others, which is significance.
That is a beautiful lesson to learn. Where they say, if you want to be a leader, you have to learn how to serve.
Yes.
And so I guess, what would you say from what you've learned from the kids? What is the biggest lesson that kids have learned since being part of your program?
I think that kids have learned the importance of bravery. People talk about having safe spaces. Safe spaces still allows people to not be their authentic selves. Safe spaces makes us very careful and not hurt people's feelings and not convict them. But I think that conviction leads to connection, and from a connection, and there's a consensus around what we need to be doing. And then that leads to collaboration, joining others, which ultimately leads to change. So that brave space is something that we create with L.E.A.D, to just be truthful and honest about where people are. We get some kids that show up on the very first day and they want to be a Major League Baseball player, and they've never played baseball before in their life. And we have to be honest with them and help them understand that, like, just because you see it on television doesn't mean you're going to be able to do that. Here are the steps and the amount of time that it's going to take. And also just teaching that bravery with regard to be excellent. Excellence to us means to meet expectations. So we're training our boys and girls to ask people first, what do you expect of me? And then when people tell you what they expect of you, if you have the capacity of mind, body, and soul to do it, and you do it, that's excellent. But, for so long, Black people have ascribed to giving 110%, going above and beyond. And for me, I just think that's irresponsible. If I'm expected to be on this podcast with you, and I meet that expectation, then that's excellence. Me coming on here trying to be more than who I am and what I stand for, that's stupidity.
Yes, you hit a point that actually something that I'm personally sometimes struggling with is that you feel for Black people feeling that you have to prove yourself more than everyone else and overdo it, and in the end put detriment to yourself. Yes.
Right. I mean, so that's the whole. If there's 100% and I'm giving 125%, then that means I just showed up at 75%. Because that extra percent I'm doing is actually going to end up working as a negative. And so it's just, look, I mean, here's my 100%. Say yes to it, say no to it. And if you say no to it, then I can figure out the things that I need to improve on. But, I think it's a really bad feeling when people say yes to your fake self. And it'll all, I mean, after a while, you forget your lines and you forget your role, and when you have to stop acting.
Yes. And so I like, and I guess that gets to the core of your program, is that you teach the youth to appreciate who they are, where they came from, and find strength in that so that they can push forward and be the best they can be from an interpersonal perspective and personal perspective, but also then as it comes out for sports, that enables them, as we've discussed before, to push further than they could probably have ever imagined.
Indeed. I mean, and that's what the D stands for, lead, to direct, using the legacy of past legends. And so that education piece, through our cultural literacy programming called Know Your Truth. Our daughter Mackenzie, who's our director of tennis, she's the founder of Know Your Truth. And so we use that to talk about people, places, and things in the educational system that is not developed. I recently found out, let me see if I can find this name. Gosh, where's his name? It's a gentleman named Charles F. Page. Charles Frederick Page was an inventor and aviator who designed and patented an airship in 1906, decades before the Wright brothers. I mean, like, that's a very important thing. That is a factual thing. And so this is a Black man in 1906 that is doing this. Again, the Emancipation Proclamation was signed in 1863. So, a few decades later, a Black man has done this. And so when you're growing up and you're Black and you're seeing that all of these things that are said to be invented by white people, you start looking and start questioning. One, you're looking at your distressed community. Two, you start looking at people that have the best things also being the inventor of those things. And so, that does have an effect on your mind, body, and soul. But then for us, we're educating them, not trying to say anything is wrong with white people. We're saying everything is wrong with white supremacy. And
Yes.
and since we're pulling back the layers on facts, now let's bring up the facts on the Black people that have done these things. And that gives a sense of belonging. It gives self-confidence, again, these social emotional learning capacities. And then it allows our boys and girls to show up in a space of bravery to ultimately become major league citizens. So yes, that is a part of our teaching. And we also do those things in a specialized group of Black people exclusively, but then we also have them interact with their white peers and white adults in a brave space, having these conversations as well too. So that's how they improve their social capital.
You started getting me thinking about, I know this is kind of, I'm going a little bit left, but when you started talking about peeling back the layers of history in order to build a sense of belonging, I started thinking, like I said, it's random. I started thinking about religion in a way, And the reason I started thinking about that is that when a lot of people, I would say specifically when you're looking probably more at Christianity and the Bible, sometimes they're like, well, where were Black people in the Bible, right? Which is a very core thing about, in our very beginning. But sometimes I have to laugh at it because do people not know where in the world these stories took place?
Right,
So
absolutely.
so it didn't need to be explained because it actually was where the people were.
Well, and that's the part about it as well too, is it's just even so again, like I said, race is man-made. It's a man-made construct. And so since we're talking about the color of one's skin, when you're looking in the Bible, everything that is that close to the equator, in order for you to survive, you had to be dark skinned. So, it's these things. And so what ends up happening with our boys and girls, and now that they're in these spaces of bravery, they start calling things what they are again. Stupidity is, I know the right thing to do and I'm not doing it. And within the school system, they're not being taught the truth. And so, we teach them to respectfully, just like even for us, to be able to challenge, the status quo. And, but education is learning what needs to be learned to do what needs to be done. So that's why as we convict them, and like I was convicted by Stan Conway, then now they start to understand what they're supposed to be doing in life. And so education is learning what needs to be learned to do what needs to be done. So now that I know what I need to be doing, now I know what I need to be learning.
Yes, definitely. And so I will come down to, because I know we have a little bit of a time crunch, to my, I guess my last question. But you've obviously talked about putting together the missing pieces, fighting over the curveballs that threaten success for youth. I guess what would you say from either larger societal perspective or even from a parent perspective, is what really do you think that is missing? And this is maybe I always call this the beauty pageant question. What do you think is missing globally for youth today?
What do I think is missing for globally? I think brave spaces. I think that's just the thing. I mean, children are essentially are taught not to be brave. You start out, they take on all kind of risk. I mean, you have a 4-year-old, and I know when I was very young, I see a pretty fire, I want to stick my hand in it. Somebody has to teach me, not to do those things. And so we obviously have to teach them to stay away from danger. But, there are some questions that they want to ask that they don't get a chance to ask. And so then we just almost teach them just to follow the status quo. I think about years ago, we are a Black-led organization. My wife is an African-American woman, and we do a baseball camp every year in a predominantly white, affluent community in Atlanta called Buckhead. So I'm from Bankhead, which is Black and poor. Buckhead is white and affluent. And so we're serving children from Bankhead in our programs. And in the summer application phase, a lot of those Black boys now go to Buckhead and actually facilitate a baseball camp experience under my leadership for white children. So that's really making things full circle. And they get paid, and they're called coach out of respect. And so a 5-year-old white child was at the camp one day transitioning to another station. And he said, Coach CJ, he said, is your wife a coach as well? And he's 5. And I said, yeah, she's a coach as well. And I said, yeah, she does tennis. And then he asked me, he said, is she white skin or black skin? And I said, well, she's black skinned. I said, you want to see a picture of her? He was like, yes. So I let him see a picture of her, and he was like, okay, cool. And he just ran off. Now, I could have called his mom and dad and said, your son really offended me, and he asked me if my wife was black, and I don't know why he asked me that, and it hurt my feelings. He just wanted to know. Kids are curious. And so, I just think across the world, if we can create not safe spaces, brave spaces for kids to really communicate how they feel and help them understand there's a difference between a discussion and a dialogue. In a discussion, we have to reach a decision at a specific time. But in a dialogue, we don't even have to agree. And we can just pick it back up tomorrow and just continuing to have this dialogue, sharing each other's thought. And again, that is a convicting moment that leads to a connection, which leads to a consensus, which leads to collaboration, which leads to change. So that's what I would want, is more brave spaces where we can get more conviction.
I love it. Brave spaces instead of safe spaces, definitely needed in today's world. Thank you, CJ, for your time and insight. If you'd like to learn more about CJ Stewart and L.E.A.D Center for Youth and to donate, go to leadcenterforyouth.org. If you have a passion for an unserved community, a social justice problem, or simply want to change minds, contact Project Good Work at projectgood.org to start your project of change today. It's that time again. We're preparing for the upcoming Changemaker Conference on September 12th. To find out more and to register, go to changemakerconference.com. To our listeners, thanks for tuning in to Project Good. We're focused on what matters.